Hello and welcome to Scotland at 7, and it's the 1st of March. I'm Hugh Stewart in our Glasgow studio, and tonight we're joined by Linda Fabiani in South Lanarkshire. Good evening, Linda. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Aye.
So, Linda, who I'm sure you've met before, is a former Deputy Presiding Officer of the Scottish Parliament. So, Linda, I'm going to begin with the first story tonight, our update on the latest we've heard from the Russian illegal invasion of Ukraine, and then we'll discuss the different aspects of that over the next 20 minutes or so. So, first of all, Linda, we hear that Russian forces have bombarded the regional government building in Ukraine's second city, killing at least 10 civilians. Officials have said as a huge armoured column rolling towards the capital, Kiev, raised fear that Russia may be resorting to pulverising civilian areas. Officials in Moscow said today that a second round of ceasefire talks would be held on Wednesday, that's tomorrow, but the Defence Ministry urged Kiev residents to leave the city before what it called high-precision strikes that it claimed would be aimed at security service targets. Ukraine's Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba accused Russian President Vladimir Putin of murdering innocent civilians as he tweeted video of the huge explosion in Kharkiv's Freedom Square, calling it a barbaric missile strike resulting from Putin's inability to break Ukraine down. Now, let's have a look at the map of Ukraine, and Linda, in a couple of minutes, we'll just look at the general position. So there's attacks in Kiev and over in the east. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said repeated Russian missile strikes on Kharkiv to the east, including the latest on a central administrative building, which left at least 35 wounded, amounts to state terrorism and a war crime. Evil armed with rockets, bombs, and artillery must be stopped, destroyed economically, said President Zelensky. In an emotional address to the European Parliament, Zelensky reiterated his country's wish to join the EU, saying, Ukraine has a desire to see our children alive. I think it's a fair one. We are fighting for survival. We are fighting to be equal members of Europe. And we're exactly the same as you are. So just a pause for the map at the minute. So we've just talked about Kiev, which is up at the top in the centre. And that's fairly close to Belarus, of course, from which direction troops have been advancing down the highway. And to the west, to the east is Kharkiv, which has been attacked today. Also, just slightly to the west of Kharkiv, we heard today that 70 Ukrainian soldiers have been killed after Russian artillery hit a military base in Oktyrka, which is a city between Kharkiv and Kiev. I don't know if you can see Oktyrka, it's on that map, just slightly to the west of Kharkiv. Russian forces have launched rocket attacks that killed dozens of civilians in Ukraine's second city, Kharkiv, and begun a renewed assault on the capital of Kiev. At least 9 people have been killed, including 3 children, and 37 wounded in one day after the shelling in Kharkiv, the city's mayor said. The southern Ukraine city of Kherson is surrounded by Russian soldiers. That's down in the southwest. And that's according to reports by a Ukrainian journalist, Alyona Panina, and the city's mayor. The International Criminal Court's prosecutor has announced that he will launch an investigation into possible war crimes or crimes against humanity in Ukraine. Satellite images taken on Monday show a Russian military convoy northwest of Kiev that stretches for about 40 miles, according to Reuters reports. Russia used a vacuum bomb on Monday in its invasion of Ukraine, according to Oksana Markarova, the Ukrainian ambassador to the US. The US has promised further sanctions against Russia and more weapons for Ukraine's military, according to Ukraine's Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba. The Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees has said that at least 406 civilian casualties have been reported, including at least 102 dead. Okay, so that's our first report. Now, Linda, does it look to you as if these attacks are getting more deadly? Do you think this is maybe the beginning of a campaign to start bombing or to increase the bombing and shelling of cities?
Certainly looks like it. I mean, I'm no strategic military expert, but it looks that way. It's almost like you could think you've got Putin sitting there absolutely determined to be the strong guy, will not be seen to back off, and just keeping going. He's on this course and he's just keeping going with it. Um, just can't bear the thought of being beat, can't bear the thought of stopping. It's horrible, absolutely horrible. And I can't begin to imagine the terror that people must be feeling. There's too many places in the world that people are terrorised, and who would have thought that this would have happened in Europe again?
Yeah,
And here
it
we,
is astonishing, isn't it? War in Europe again, because that's the reality
mhm.
of it. Now,
Yeah,
does this look to your end really like the start? Is this going to be a long campaign? Is that what you're worried about?
I am. I'm really worried about the state of mind of uh, a totalitarian leader who has such power. It seems to be one man says this will happen and it does. I can't understand why people round about him, also in positions of power, are allowing this to happen. But then again, history has shown us that this is the way of war, this is the way of power grabs. And it looks like we're even in this modern age, we're in exactly the same position again, where you have a power hungry leader terrified of losing power, because I'm sure there's some of this behind it, with a belief that he's invincible and will keep on going. So, yes, I'm really worried that this will go on until there's thousands and thousands dead on both sides. I mean, I have read some reports about the Russian army operatives who were, it almost seems like, duped into the kind of operation that they were going to be carrying out. Um, So my heart bleeds for absolutely everybody. You're looking at an army which has lots of very young people in it, young, naive people who I think have been lied to, who have suffered terrible propaganda. And then you have the civilian population who are doing no more than trying to create their own stable and secure nation. And, they've had a hard time for decades. And here they are again, right in the middle of killing. And yes, that's my concern, that it goes on and on.
Yes, as you've said, it's not good for anyone, and we have heard many reports from The Guardian, from Reuters, and other sources of young Russian soldiers, probably conscripts, really confused and they really don't know
Yeah,
what they're doing there, and some have been taken prisoner. So I haven't heard any more on that. I presume that the Ukrainian forces are treating them well, but there's not very much reporting from actually what's happening, but the fighting, it looks like, is going to get closer to the cities where the journalists are. So it's difficult to know really
yeah.
what's happening on these long supply lines, that supply line of 40 miles up from the borders with
And it's all
Belarus.
been so sudden, If all the talk was generally about this is no more than saber rattling, and then all of a sudden it was war. Yeah, which is makes me even more scared about what this man and those around him are capable of.
Well, you're quite right. History does teach us that when a dictator gets into a situation like this, there's only one way they can only keep on going
Yeah,
forward. There doesn't seem to be any
yeah.
possibility that Putin could call a ceasefire. I know we have peace talks happening at the moment, but they don't seem to be having any effect at all on the ground. So he can't turn back now that Putin's launched this war. He's got to keep going, hasn't he?
That's how it looks to me. It would seem to me that the psyche is exactly that, because he couldn't bear to be seen as someone who would back down and would feel that his credibility as leader of the Russian people would be questioned if this actually happened.
Well,
I
one
hope that those
aspect.
round about him that will.
So I'm just wondering if the economic aspect, which we'll turn to next, might be a way of putting pressure on Putin
Mhm.
and the Russian government. We're now going to turn to sanctions. Now, today, Russia said, today, Tuesday, it was placing temporary curbs on foreigners seeking to exit Russian assets, putting the brakes on an accelerating investor exodus driven by crippling Western sanctions imposed because of the invasion of Ukraine. Of course, Russian assets went into free fall on Tuesday, with London-listed shares on the MSCI Russia EFT plunging. Excuse me, that means that's a way of investing in emerging markets in London. So shares on the Russian EFT plunged 50% to hit a fresh low, and Russia's biggest lender, Sberbank, slumped 21% as investors raced for the exit. Major money managers, including hedge fund Man Group and British asset managers ABRDN, have been cutting their positions in Russia, even as the ruble slumped to a record low and trading froze on ruble bonds. President of the European Commission Ursula von der Leyen gave a passionate speech in the European Parliament in which she outlined the bloc's commitment to stopping Putin's invasion of Ukraine. She announced that for the first time ever, they are using the European budget to purchase and deliver military equipment to a country that is under attack, in a €500 million pledge and an additional €500 million for humanitarian aid. She said that the EU would never accept the takeover of Ukraine, and Putin's actions had only served to make members more united. So what we're trying to do here, of course, is attack Putin on the economic front. And I guess the thinking here is, are we trying to starve Russia? Russia's not a rich country already, and people are going to become poorer. Is the idea behind this, Linda, that eventually the Russian people are going to say to Putin, why are we doing this? We don't support it because we can't get anything to eat. We can't feed the family.
Yeah, I mean that's what's further down the line if the sanctions keep going. But I would hope that before it gets desperate for the ordinary Russian person, that those with vested interests, I mean, we use the word oligarch in relation to Russian business people with masses of money offshore in London, in various financial capitals. Now, they're going to be hit hard here. So I would hope that before it gets to the point where the Russian people themselves are suffering real hardship, I mean, we could be talking starvation here. I would hope that those with vested interests and indeed good consciences would be creating to such a level that notice would have to be taken by Putin and his cohorts with a view to pulling back in this and stopping the war.
Now, to talk about the European, the EU's united position against Putin, the topic was discussed in the European Parliament today, and we have footage of a speech that the European Parliament President made. I think she was speaking to basically a Ukrainian crowd outside the Parliament. So let's have a look at that now. Yeah, have we got that clip from Brussels today? I'll come back to that later.
It was certainly very powerful from what I saw of it. And, it struck me that, Hugh, that this is something, that, the very basic foundation of the European Union, the League of Nations, and then following on to what we have, was about...
Thank you. Thank you to all of you who are here. Thank you to all the Ukrainians who have joined us today. Thank you for being here. I would like to first start by saying that Europe is with you today. We will be with you tomorrow, and we will not leave your side. We are here in the European Parliament, in the House of Democracy, and in this House we will work to find a space for you to send a message that is so much needed to the world. We hear your European aspirations loudly and clearly. And when you look to this House, you will find a friend and an ally throughout the whole process. Because we must face the future together. I give you our commitment for that. And we know that the courage and the bravery of the people of Ukraine, this will be a long and prosperous future. You have inspired the world. Your strength of purpose, your defiance, your values have lit up a spark across the globe. Today, everyone knows what it means to be Ukrainian, and that is thanks to you. And you will find Europe. We will help with weapons, with aid, with logistics, with massive sanctions, and we will do whatever it takes to hold aggressors to account. Because the age of dictators and autocrats is over. President Putin, Alexander Lukashenko, all the oligarchs who bankroll them will be held accountable for waging war in peaceful Europe. So long live Ukraine, long live Europe, Slava Ukraini.
Okay, Linda, I'm sorry, we're a bit late getting that clip. That was my fault. I didn't
All right.
signpost it enough. So that was Roberta Metsola, the President of the European Parliament. And she was speaking today after the Parliament itself had heard from Vladimir Zelensky. He appeared on Zoom and his speech was met by a standing ovation and then by strong words from Ursula von der Leyen of the European Commission. So she was really underlining the points that Roberta Metsola made there, that Russia will not be permitted to move in the financial markets. Their financial economy and the movement of their oligarchs is going to be strangled, right? Is that the best thing that the European Union can do at the moment?
Well, I think it's part of what they're doing. And, you know, the European Union comes under a lot of stick. And as I was starting to say, this is the European Union, League of Nations, and everything that's happened. The very, very basis of it is togetherness in Europe and prevention of war, keeping people together. So, as well as all these other things they're doing, I think we should be aware of what's also going on. There's the European Union, I think it's called the Civil Protection Mechanism, which was established some years ago, and it kicks into place immediately. And all the member states and some others out with the European Union, but in the proximity, tap into that as well. And it's where everyone works together and very quickly offers aid in times of disaster. Ukraine applied to that, and that's why very quickly in place there has been different countries, different states within the European Union and a few beyond who have been pledging help in all sorts of different ways. So that's really important, togetherness and working together for the benefit of one of their neighbours, one of their direct neighbours. And that can only be good for all of us within Europe.
Are you struck, as I am, by the fact that the lead in sanctions seems to be taken by the European Union, and Britain seems to me, anyway, to be kind of lagging behind? Is that your impression, Linda?
Well, I think it certainly looks that way on the surface, but in times like this, I don't think, unless it's something terribly glaring, that it serves anyone's purposes to really be having a go, because we don't know what's going on in the background. The only thing I would seriously have a go about is the UK government's response to refugees. I think the UK has to go a lot further, but it is a mark of what UK government policy has been for years now. And you've got that immigration bill coming through and everything within it.
Well, they have moved on.
That.
Can I just update on that, on the question of visas? The UK government today has been urged to waive all visa requirements for any Ukrainian nationals seeking refuge in the UK. In a letter to the Prime Minister, First Minister Nicola Sturgeon said, "It is vital that rapid, safe and legal routes be established immediately, cooperating with our international partners wherever possible. We must learn the lessons from the Afghanistan resettlement schemes in order to provide rapid and appropriate support to those who need it." The letter also says Scotland stands ready to offer refuge and sanctuary for those who may be displaced, as we did with the Syrian resettlement programme, which saw all 32 local authorities in Scotland welcome Syrian families into their communities. The Scottish Government is committed to working alongside local authorities to support Ukrainian refugees to settle in Scotland. The First Minister said, "For those Ukrainians who were already in the UK prior to Russia's unprovoked and illegal invasion, the UK Government announcement of temporary visa extensions and in-country visa category switching measures simply do not go far enough. Ukrainians in the UK should be offered the assurance that they will be offered protection in the UK for as long as is required, regardless of their immigration status, the migrant status. In this respect, it's vital that you lift the no recourse to public funds and any employment restrictions so that individuals can support themselves and can access vital public services during this difficult time without fear of breaching the conditions of their visa." So that was the First Minister earlier on. I think my information tonight is that Priti Patel has moved to do that. I think she has said, first of all, people with relatives here can come and they can work for up to a year. I think that's what they've said.
Yeah.
But there's still not the complete open door. We're still not saying, if you need to come, just come. We're saying under certain conditions.
Yeah, and still looking for the detail of that, because I understand that some of the things that were said when it was then checked out the Home Office, they said that the guidance had not changed and it had no notice of change, even though Priti Patel had said, to paraphrase, "I have changed it." So the devil's in the detail, as they say. So we'll wait and see what happens there.
Yeah,
But
fair enough. But
surely, if the will is there, it can be done. I know we're no longer members of the European.
okay,
we're
but
no
still,
longer
I'm
members
sorry, I
of the
didn't hear you too well, Linda. My signal's not getting too
Oh,
good.
right, I'm
I'll
sorry.
just move on anyway. Sorry, I keep interrupting you. It's
Okay.
because the
It's
signal
like,
it's a bit
you know,
echoey in my
it's-
ear for some reason.
I was a politician, so it happened all the time.
It's not because there's a big echo in South Lanarkshire tonight, is it then? So anyway, on visas, it looks like some movement on allowing Ukrainian people in from Priti Patel, but there is still a condition that they have to have a visa. So the UK certainly has not gone ahead as far as, for example, Ireland in inviting Ukrainians in if they need to get here.
Yeah.
The next aspect is about the no-fly between Russia and the EU, and indeed between Russia and UK. The UK government is under mounting pressure to close the loopholes and to tighten the rules in order to prevent Russian assets and wealth being transported back to Russia through the use of private aircraft from the UK. The UK government had announced at the end of last week that all aircraft owned, chartered or operated by a person connected with Russia or which is registered in Russia will be prohibited from UK airspace. However, in a letter to the UK Government Transport Secretary Grant Shapps, SNP's Westminster leader Ian Blackford warned that the Notice of Air Missions Regulation, that's the NOTAM regulation, which was issued at the end of last week, was failing to properly put an end to these flights where they involve privately owned or chartered airplanes, after a private jet travelled from Inverness to Moscow with 3 individuals and cargo on board on Saturday morning. Commenting, Ian Blackford said, "In the context of the horrors of the Putin regime is inflicting on the Ukrainian people, it is vital that there's a shared objective in the UK of preventing Russian assets, wealth, and if necessary, individuals fleeing back to Russia through the use of private aircraft in the UK. I welcome the NOTAM regulation, which was issued with the aim of stopping these journeys. However, it's clear from events where a private jet departed from Inverness to Moscow with people and cargo on board that the regulations are failing to put an end to these flights." So I think this plane was registered in Estonia. Did you read about that? So it got through the loophole anyway, and they managed to get away. So I think there's general agreement that there shouldn't be any flights between UK and Russia. Do you think this is just maybe a loophole that should be closed or will be closed quickly?
Well, certainly the UK government are disputing, some of the issues that have been raised in the press and by others. But certainly, if there's a loophole there, yes, it has to be closed. Because I know it's difficult. I was trying to work out earlier, Hugh, how this could all be done. It would seem like it's a third country registration, ownership, whatever. and then they're using it. And I was also thinking, how does it work? Like if if a plane says its destination is, I don't know, you mentioned Estonia, and then something there, it decides to fly to Russia. I don't know how all these things work. I suppose if something like that was to happen, you would then need to put a sanction on that owner, operator, or whatever. But it's crucial that loopholes, where they exist, are closed as far as possible. And every time another loophole shows, get it closed really quickly.
Yep. So obviously that's just another attempt to tighten up the financial restrictions and the restrictions really on
Yes.
the Russian oligarchs who have been enjoying themselves in Europe with Russian people's money. Now the final part of the of tonight's report on Ukraine, the SNP is urging all Scottish exporters to stop trading with Russia as the country's invasion of Ukraine continues to escalate. Industries such as whisky, salmon, and cashmere producers are being urged to join the international community in sanctioning Russia. Scottish companies would join other corporations such as Shell and BP who have pulled funding out of Russia and firms with ties to the country. Commenting, the SNP's member for Scottish Parliament, Fiona Hislop, said, Scotland can take a lead here by companies stopping Russia from importing their products, sending a clear message that Scotland completely condemns the actions of the Russian government and they will suffer consequences as a result. However, of course, this is the exporters too will suffer consequences. So there's no easy way of doing sanctions, is there, Linda? So it is a reduction on economic activity, which hurts both sides. So we're having to say to our exporters, like, you're going to have to take this on the chin. If you're selling stuff to Russia and your people are employed to make that stuff, for now anyway, you're going to have to take the hit and stop that trade.
Yeah, I think that's the case. We're all going to be hit in some way economically, as it is, no matter what, because the way that international markets work. So even if it doesn't look like there's a direct link between Scotland and Russia, it's still going to hit when the waves go out of the economic sanctions. But I think we have to be really strong in this. The bottom line is there's an illegal invasion of a country in the European Union, and we have to take every single action that we can to cut off the money supply to that country. I mean, I would hope that we're also including Belarus in what we're saying here, Russia and Belarus, although of course Belarus is not nearly as big a market as Russia. And yes, it will be difficult, of course it will be. I mean, there's a lot of exports from Scotland to Russia in particular. But yes, we're just going to have to take the hit.
And of course, there is there's a different amount of pain according to how much activity you do with the Russian economy. And in particular, obviously, gas is one of the big issues. The importing of gas is pretty important to heat homes in Germany and Italy, I believe. They're very exposed to the Russian market. Now, we're not. So in a way, we've got a cheaper price to pay. Does that maybe explain why Olaf Scholz in Germany seemed to be very reluctant last week to agree to kicking the Russian banks out of the international SWIFT money transfer system? And we could get in our high horse and say, well, we're going to stop selling cashmere jumpers to Russia, so you can just do without central heating for the rest of the winter. But it is tough, isn't it? So
it's
Germany was hesitating, but yeah, as you said, there is a price to pay, isn't it, on both sides?
Well, it's a really hard one, and for all we're not dependent on, the Russian gas, and, as I was saying, even if there's not a direct link, we will still suffer some of the fallout of that as energy markets tighten up. So, yes, I mean, Germany did seem reluctant. I'm glad they have moved on that one, because without the big players and without the commitment of all the European Union countries to work together, and thankfully it looks like that's very much happening, under the systems that they have, we're not going to make a big impact. We're not going to cut off the money supply at source. We're not going to have the oligarchs who are self-interested in this start to panic about their own futures because they can't make more money. So all these things working together is putting pressure on Putin and
Yes, again,
his government, if there is such a thing as his government, because it seems to be just one man.
Yeah, I don't know how decision-making works in the Kremlin these days. Yeah, it looks quite centralised, as they say, as a, as an administration. Yeah,
Whoever
you
sits
just
at
reminded
the
me.
top of the big table.
Yep. Ursula von der Leyen also made the point today that two oligarchs, she said, you'll not be allowed to come here. You're not even going to be allowed to dock your boats, your luxury yachts will not be allowed in our harbours. So yeah, they are saying to the people who really run Russia, the oligarchs, right, the party's over. Now, Linda, I'm going to move on to a Scottish story today. I don't know whether you've had time to read the Scottish Government's new national strategy for economic transformation, but I've read it so that you don't have to. So
My
Kate Forbes
goodness.
announced it today. A new national strategy for economic transformation underpinned by detailed analysis of Scotland's economic strengths and weaknesses. It has been published today. The strategy contains over 70 actions across 5 key priority programmes, which have been identified as having the greatest potential to deliver economic growth that significantly outperforms the last decade within the current constitutional arrangements, in other words, under the UK. So 5 key priority programmes, and let's just have a look at the graphic which goes with it. So those are the 5 along the bottom there. So it's encouraging new enterprise. Secondly, looking for new market opportunities. That's particularly in green markets. Thirdly, it's to improve productivity in business. Fourthly, it's about a skilled workforce. And fifthly, about a fairer and more equal society. So those 5 boxes along the bottom are the, well, let's just start at the top then. So the overall objective, this is over the next 10 years, is to deliver a well-being economy for Scotland. And then we have the 3 ambitions: a fairer economy, a wealthier economy, but presumably evenly divided, and thirdly, a green economy moving towards sustainability. And so those ambitions have to be delivered by those 5 programmes of action. That's the blue and green boxes along the bottom. So that's basically it in one graphic. That saves you reading about all 70 pages of it or whatever. So to go back to the story, the Scottish Government say we want the next 10 years to outperform the previous 10 years in all of those measures. Investment will be prioritised in entrepreneurialism, skills and retraining, and the development of new markets and opportunities, particularly in the just transition to net zero. The Economy Secretary, Kate Forbes, says it provides renewed clarity on Scotland's economic vision and a relentless focus on delivery in order to improve economic productivity, accelerate growth, and ensure work produces a genuine route out of poverty through better quality jobs and higher wages. The 6th programme, sort of underneath it all, marks a step change in the way the Scottish Government and business listen to, support and work with each other in this national endeavour to transform the economy. Shaped by an advisory council with extensive engagement from stakeholders, this will enable government, business and key partners to work together to create a more prosperous, more productive and more international competitive economy. The Economy Secretary launched the strategy at the Michelin Scotland Innovation Park in Dundee, a location which embodies the potential transformation that can be realised by bringing those 6 key programmes of action together. Kate Forbes said, "This strategy internationally focuses on those 5 key priorities within Scotland's current powers, which we believe will deliver the most impact. These are based on extensive data analysis, which does not ignore the short or long-term challenges and seeks to meet them head-on. It does so by identifying our key strengths as a nation and the economic opportunities with the greatest potential for Scotland. Through our detailed analytical work, we have identified significant and targeted action that can shift the dial in these areas by doubling down on the work that is producing results and by working together to maximise our success." So obviously nobody's going to argue against that, but it strikes me, looking at the document, that the strategy is what you might call government-led. It's as opposed to market-led, Linda. In other words, the idea really, I think the dominant idea in the 80s and 90s was that the government cannot pick winners. The market will pick winners. If you've got an idea and it's a flop, the market will soon let you know. And the idea then was it's not the job of government to direct the economy. So this it strikes me as a very government-led strategy. Well, it says that very clearly in a number of cases. This is what is needed, and this is what the government will do to make it happen. Are you in sympathy with that general approach?
I think think I am. I haven't read it in detail like you have, Hugh. I have to say, I flipped through it and read the summaries, etc. And I knew some of the stuff that it was about. I think it's, what we've got here has a recognition that times have changed a bit. I mean, the last couple of years through COVID and everything else has changed our society to a degree. It has also made people right across the board, I believe, much more aware of the importance of cooperation, working together, looking after each other, everything that's encompassed in that phrase well-being, the well-being of your society. Many, many years ago, I was on a steering group that was run by Oxfam to talk about a well-being society, and we did loads of studies because this was a new word then. It must be about 10 years ago. Patrick Harvey was involved in it as well. It was him and I were the Parliament reps, and everybody just thought it was a bit pie in the sky and it was a bit airy-fairy, and it was all these nice people talking about this stuff. But what it took a while to get traction. What the last couple of years has done, and what we've all been through together, has given a much greater recognition to the need to be thinking in ways like that. And it's about everyone's well-being. GDP, yeah, you can look and say, oh, the GDP of that country is great. But then if you look within it and you look at the poverty and the gap between rich and poor, America is a very good case in point for that. You realise that is not a good measurement of a healthy society. So I think what we're seeing in this strategy by Kate Forbes and Ivan McKee is a recognition that well-being is so very, very important. So everything within this strategy has to push towards that. Now, I don't believe the market would deal with that on its own. That can't be market-led. There has to be a level of government direction in that. And I'm looking forward to reading all the detail, because I hope that within some of what we're seeing here is also plans to have much more employee involvement. I hope that's part of the fairer work agenda. I hope that, I know the STUC were involved in the advisory group. I know today that they said they were a wee bit disappointed that they didn't get as far as they'd like to, but I would suggest that means that they did get some concessions there and that we're moving forward. I would like to see more emphasis on employee ownership, for example. I would like to see things like cooperative businesses, etc., being recognised as a very valid part of our economy going forward, and not just as a little addition. Much more emphasis on that, because any company I've ever been in that works in that way, and employee ownership, I've been in companies in East Kilbride where employee ownership has increased production and done extremely well. So I would like to see a big emphasis on workforces, but also the entrepreneurial side, which is getting very much pushed as well. I would also like to see much more tailored support for entrepreneurs, rather than the sort of tick box culture that has been prevalent for an awful lot of years. That if you don't meet all this and get so many ticks out of 10, we're not going to help you. Some of the best things have come from ideas that people have looked at the start and said, oh my goodness, that's a bit dodgy looking, I don't understand it. Greater understanding. And I think we're already finding that in the tech side of business, that the people are much more willing to look at innovation. So all in all, I think it's probably the best way forward.
Yes, that word innovation appears frequently. Yeah, there is a big
Oh,
emphasis
does
on new
it?
sectors, and that includes green. And this is part of the just transition, of course. And so I think the document's emphasising that it's the new industries of the future, the new sustainable industries, which is where the growth will come. And on your point, Linda, on new entrepreneurs setting up new businesses, the document spells out that there will be advisors, there will be a team of leaders at different stages of a new enterprise's development. And so that's what the government promises to do. If you've got an idea, we've got people who will advise you. So there's a lot of emphasis on that. And just finally, you mentioned the STUC. Yeah, Ros Foyer of the STUC was was on that advisory group. And I've read her statement today. Yes, as you said, there are one or two things that she's not wild about, but the STUC does say we will continue to engage with the positive aspects of a programme. Okay, so that's Scotland's new industrial strategy, spelling out the best they can do under the constraints of the UK system over the next 10 years. Right, so let's move on now. Good news again, Scotland's NHS workforce has reached a record high of more than 155,000 whole-time equivalent staff. Numbers of doctors, dentists, nurses, midwives, allied health professionals and support staff working across Scotland's hospitals and in communities has increased by over 7,000 in the past year alone. Staffing levels have now increased for 10 consecutive years in NHS Scotland and have grown by over 28,500 full-time equivalents since 2006, meaning there's an extra 22.6% staff working in the health service. Health Secretary Humza Yousaf said, under this government, staffing in Scotland's NHS has risen to record highs and our long-term investment in this workforce has accelerated since the outset of the pandemic. He went on to say, I would like to pay tribute to the dedication and commitment of our frontline healthcare staff for the vital role they have played in keeping us all safe throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. So increased numbers in the health service, I'm sure you're very pleased with that increase, 22.6%. Really, I think the figures are showing since the start of the SNP term of office, really. Is that one of the reasons why the Scottish NHS generally produces the best figures in any of the outcomes of the 4 NHSs in Britain?
I think that's part of it, but there's also about the culture and the value that a society places on those who work in our health services and indeed our social care sector as well. And we've got a way to go in that. The will is there, and that's so very, very important. So yeah, it's good news, and my goodness, we've needed extra staff, of course we have. But it hasn't been easy. I think that's what I'd like to emphasise, having followed this for many years. It's been really difficult. And there are still difficulties. Yes, it's really good news. We've got all these extra, and it's full-time equivalents. So let nobody say, "Oh, it's all part-time work" or whatever. The figures shown are full-time equivalents. So yes, it's very, very good news. However, within that, we still have shortages in particular specialisms. Now, I know that NHS Lanarkshire, for example, has always had an uphill struggle to try and employ consultants at certain levels and in certain specialisms. And that is the case right across the UK. And so Scotland has that problem as well. So it doesn't mean that everything's rosy. Of course it doesn't. But yes, Hugh, we do well. We do better than our equivalent services in the rest of the UK. And that's a mark of Scotland's government and Scotland's Parliament having worked very, very hard, but mostly a mark of, and they get a lot of stick, the health boards across the country, who are certainly not perfect by any manner of means. However, they do work very, very hard to try and give a good service to those in their care. So it's a mark of the hard work of board level right down to absolutely everyone, whether they work in the hospital, whether they work in a community health facility, GPs, or whatever. It's collective.
Yes, it needs to be said more often. Yes, thank you, Linda. Now, our next story, taking us down to Westminster, the SNP has ramped up pressure on the Department of Work and Pensions, the DWP, to end the cruel benefit cap, which is pushing families into poverty and hardship as the Tory cost of living crisis continues. The SNP's Work and Pensions spokesperson, David Linden MP, will lead a debate in the House of Commons today. Well, he's presumably done that already, calling on the UK government to end the benefit cap, which disproportionately impacts lone parent families, the majority of whom are women, as well as larger families and ethnic minority families. Based on the latest DWP figures as of August 21, 180,000 households have had their benefit capped, including that 6,400 households in Scotland, receiving on average £54 a week less in support than they would have had the cap not been in place. And commenting, David Linden said, ever since its introduction in 2013, the benefit cap has limited the support that some of the most vulnerable people in our constituencies receive, adding, because of it, many families are facing a grim reality of having to choose between heating or eating. Mr. Linden went on to say, policies like the benefit cap, cruel DWP sanctions, and backwards cuts to universal credit are directly contributing to the Tory cost of living crisis and exacerbating the concerns hard-working households already have. So we're talking about poverty, and the strange idea with the benefit cap is it's, as I seem to call, some Conservatives seem to think that benefits was a way of making money. So does this indicate that Tories don't really know what it's like to be living on benefits, Linda?
Well, it's not just the Tories, it's a lot of the press as well, you know, the dog whistle press reports. They always manage to come up with somebody that they perceive as screwing the system, you know, and that becomes what people think is the norm, and that puts the stigma on those who, for perfectly valid reasons, need benefits, either short term or indeed long term. You know, meanwhile, you get tax evasion, tax avoidance, and all the rest of it. People not paying tax. Aye, it's an ongoing struggle. But this is just, I mean, the benefit cap was just another thing that the Tories put in place. And you know, this talk about they don't understand, they don't want to understand, you know. They quite like to have a section of society to kick. Because while they're getting everybody focusing on that and kicking them, their cronies are getting away with murder up top, you know. And it's just the way of the kind of divided society we have when it's run by those for whom status quo is the best way forward. So there's the benefit cap, there's all the other things that have been getting brought in as well, the latest employment things about people cutting down the time for people to try and find a decent job. And there's all these folk that fall through the cracks as well, Hugh. You know, in my job, I met them all the time. Perfectly decent, good people who, for some reason, were getting shafted by the state and the benefit system. And nobody's doing anything to help them at UK level. Thankfully, at Scotland's level, we're managing to ameliorate some of the worst of that stuff and trying to make it a bit better for people.
Yes, the Scottish Government has done its best to mitigate caps. But as you say, Linda, it's funny how some things are capped, but there's no cap on how much money you can send overseas to the British Virgin Islands. There's no cap on how much Russian money you can take as political donations. Just a couple of stories to finish off with, Linda, then you can get back to your curry. So next we hear that there's £2 million made available for armed forces veterans. Services who provide mental health support to armed forces veterans have been given a funding boost. The Scottish Government has announced 1.4 million for combat stress and a further 666,000 for Veterans First Point. Combat Stress is a UK-wide charity which helps veterans and their families deal with mental ill health, including post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety and depression. Veterans First Point is a free advice and support service for former service personnel provided as part of the NHS. The funding announcements made for 22-23 were made during a Scottish Government debate in the Scottish Parliament covering both the health and veterans portfolios. Cabinet Secretary for Justice and Veterans Keith Brown said, "As we emerge from the pandemic, the mental health of the whole population is a fundamental consideration for the Scottish Government, and we must be particularly mindful of the mental well-being of veterans who have sacrificed so much for us all." Yeah, I think we all have a debt, don't we, to veterans. That's certainly something I've never got involved in any. I've always kept a mile away from anything military, so I have to say I've great admiration for service veterans, and as far as I'm concerned, whatever they need, they should get it. You're not going to disagree with that, are you?
No, I'm absolutely not. You know, over the last few years, there has been a unanimous will in the Scottish Parliament to do the best possible for veterans. And, you know, there's no political point scoring or anything to be taken in this. There is a recognition that this is something a decent society should do. And I'm glad to say that over the last few years, there's been a recognition of some of the very, very particular issues faced by veterans. You know, the very word makes it sound like older people and things, but sometimes it's fairly young lads and indeed lasses who have maybe gone straight from school into the armed forces, maybe do their 10, 12 years, and they come out at perhaps 30 years old, never having had to look after themselves, if you like, live on their own, make all these decisions. So that's one aspect of it. And then you go up that scale, and of course, there's those who have suffered great trauma, you know, through being in battle and different things. And that's where the post traumatic stress disorder comes in, the depression, the inability to fit back into society without a great deal of help. So joining up these services, whether it be welfare, housing, employment services, health and medical services, joining them up to give the best possible package to someone who hasn't been away and done what's a very, very difficult job is extremely important. And I'm glad to hear today's announcement. And I'm really glad that it's not an issue that you get political fights about in Scotland.
Yeah, indeed, yes. So that's agreed, I'm sure, by all sides. So that's extra support for mental health for our military veterans. And our final story tonight, Linda, we hear today that Nicola Benedetti will be the next Edinburgh Festival director. World-renowned violinist, educator and arts and culture advocate Nicola Benedetti, CBE, has been named as the director designate of the Edinburgh International Festival and will become festival director on the 1st of October this year. In taking the role, she will both be the first Scottish and the first female festival director since the festival began in 1947. Nicola Benedetti is one of the most influential classical artists of today, a global performer and regular contributor at the International Festival, most recently in her 2021 residency. The Grammy and Brit Award winning violinist was also named BBC Music Magazine's 2021 Personality of the Year, awarded in part for her online support for musicians during the pandemic, a reflection of her passionate work as an ambassador for music education. So, Linda, first of all, I'm sure you will welcome this superb musician taking on this post. And I just realised this afternoon that there hasn't actually been a Scottish director of the Edinburgh Festival. Does that strike you as a bit odd? On the one hand, it is an international festival, so the fact that we look around is good, isn't it?
It's great, but you know, I was wondering about that earlier, and because Richard DeMarco, you know, was instrumental at the festival, or was that the Fringe? I think I'm getting confused. But I thought, wait a minute, Richard DeMarco's Scottish, and he was very, very much involved.
Well, I think Richard DeMarco
yes,
wasn't director, but he certainly
Fringe.
has put a lot of events on. So he's certainly been part of the community,
what
but it's not directed it.
And here we have another Scots Italian taking the lead, so I'm absolutely delighted. And I'm absolutely in awe of Nicola Benedetti from the very first time I ever clapped eyes on her to see her perform as a very young woman. And then having met her a couple of times, I mean, I don't know her, I'm not saying I know her, but I've ended up meeting her a couple of times at various things. And she's absolutely delightful. She's got everything. She's clever, she's talented, she's got the loveliest personality, she's caring, you know, all the work she's done with underprivileged young people too. She's a great ambassador for Scotland, and she'll be a great ambassador for the festival.
Yeah, well, personally, as a fan of trad music, I'm just delighted that there's a fiddle player got the job. But I wonder if the other thing that strikes me about the Edinburgh Festival is it seems to be for the culture world in general, but not really very much for ordinary people in Scotland. And the classic joke, of course, is that nobody from the rest of Scotland ever goes there.
I'm not convinced about that, Hugh. I think when you go, I mean, yes, it's expensive, right? I'm not taking that away, but they do concession things and always have done, you know, and cheaper tickets for afternoons and things. But, you know, I think you'd find if you went along, you'd be surprised at the range of audience that was there.
Well, I must make more of an effort. I have been to a couple of fringe events, I must say, but maybe I should make more of an effort to get along there. But do you think that there might be any kind of change of direction? What I'm thinking of is that it's not much of a
Uh-huh.
people's festival, is it? Most other festivals, the kind of festivals I go to, are usually just people who live nearby just go and hear some music. It's not that kind of thing, is it? Do you think there might be a change
Well,
in emphasis?
there may well be, but I would also say to you, I mean, Miss Benedetti, for all she's a classical musician, she has a great awareness of Scottish traditional music, for example, because I've heard her talk about that. So I think you may well find a widening out, and more of a push out to communities, because that's where Miss Benedetti's background has been over the last few years, is spreading the joy, and she's very, very good at it.
Yeah, well, yes, I've seen her myself on telly a couple of times doing jigs and reels, doing Scottish traditional music. I have heard her saying that, and concentrating, of course, on her classical career, she kind of left that to one side, but she does actually really enjoy playing the trad music as well, and she's extremely good at it as well. A musician, actually, a real live working musician in head of the Edinburgh Festival from October. So I think that's fantastic news. So good luck to Nicola Benedetti and well done. So, Linda, that's just about it for tonight on day 6 of the Russian illegal invasion of Ukraine. So, I'm going to, just as we wind up, say a happy Bosnian National Day to any Bosnian friends who are watching or who follow us on Twitter. Today is the 30th anniversary of the modern Bosnian state being set up. Good luck to all our Bosnian friends. I know there are Bosnian people who watch us. And so finally, Linda, so I'm sure you'll join me in thanking the regular viewers, and especially if there's anyone new who's just come across Broadcasting Scotland tonight. So can I point out that we receive no state funding. We don't get any government funding at all. And everybody who subscribes on that website there is actually paying for the station. So if you'd like to help keep us going, then please look at broadcastingscotland.scot, and for beginning with £5 a month with no upper limit, there's no cap, then please consider becoming one of our subscribers and keeping us going. We do have a big range of things we would like to do. We've got all the equipment here. We've got, as Linda knows, because you've been in the studio, we've got a really good load of state-of-the-art equipment, and we just need more funding to be able to put on more programs and use it. So please consider giving us a hand, and if you are one of our subscribers already, then thanks. It is great to have you on board. So that's it for me tonight, and I'll be back tomorrow. So from Hugh Stewart in the studio and from Linda Fabiani in South Lanarkshire, thanks for watching tonight, and we'll see you later. Bye.